Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the season premiere of Grid Live Encore. I'm Ben Schneider alongside Brandon Crossland. Market analyst Casey Campbell will be joining us a little bit later on in the show. Brandon, it's great to see you again. How's it going?
It's going great, Ben. And I tell you what, it's a thrill to be back on Grid Live Encore. Brand new 2023, and we are just coming out ready to go, and Daytona no less. So let's get right into it.
And it's good to see Demas in the chat here as well. He's been waiting for this for a few days. I know Joe got the streams up a little bit early for Daytona week, as we've got a whole week full of programming for you guys. I know Demas has been waiting for this, so good to see you in the chat room tonight. And we encourage all our viewers, if you're in the chat room, feel free to ask us questions or comment on what we're talking about. We'll be happy to engage with you as well. We do have one race to briefly go over. I'll touch on that a little bit later on in the show. The Whelen Modified Tour was in action at New Smyrna Speedway on Saturday night, but we have a major top story to go over first, and it's pretty ironic. It was basically the exact opposite of how we opened last year's debut episode of Encore. Kyle Busch's Xfinity Series retirement is no more. The new Richard Childress Racing driver will step back into the second-tier series for 5 races this season for Colleague Racing, who, of course, share an alliance with RCR. Now, Busch had left the door open to returning to the series if Gibbs wanted or needed him to for business purposes. And with Colleague's number 10 car losing Voyager as a sponsor, Landon Castle will be unable to race full-time in 2023, and the decision was made to bring Busch in as part of the new All-Star entry. Busch joins RCR teammate Austin Dillon and Colleagues Cup drivers AJ Allmendinger and Justin Haley as drivers who have been announced for at least a few races. Haley will run the season opener at Daytona this weekend. So, Brandon, what is your reaction to hearing that the 2009 champion and 102-time race winner will be back in the Xfinity Series in 2023?
As much as I want to say I'm surprised, I'm really not that surprised. Kyle Busch has established himself as that kind of personality that's just, I'm back, deal with it. I'm here again. And so here he comes yet again, back to the Xfinity Series. Kyle Busch, he's going to be with Colleague Racing after Voyager left, as you said, and he's going to be going to first his hometown track of Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and then he'll pick up at Phoenix, Charlotte, Watkins Glen, and Darlington. And NASCAR.com telling us that the sponsorship is going to be announced later, and it's going to be curious as well to see who's going to be sponsoring Kyle Busch with Colleague Racing. I mean, there's some you could pick out of the hat there from Colleague already, or maybe somebody from his Cup sponsorships will step down there with him for those endeavors, or possibly just a Rowdy Energy car. That seems pretty plausible as well. But man, Kyle Busch coming back to the Xfinity Series, it's really not uncharacteristic of him, although it came as a surprise. And I remember talking to you, Ben, before maybe just a few days ago, whenever this news first broke. What really is the nature of this decision for Kyle Busch? Is it business? Is it just pure pleasure? Is it just because he likes to win and this is where he can do that? Or is it because he likes the group of guys at Colleague? He likes what they've been putting together in such a short time, and all those probably play a part in that. I'd say business is probably the biggest piece of the puzzle. But I'll be honest with you, now that he has moved away from Toyota, going to a Chevrolet Camaro, it just feels different. And I'm sure once we get into the season, we're going to see is the same old Kyle, but it just feels like a different journey into the Xfinity Series. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not as disappointed. Like I'm actually kind of okay with it for a little bit, but I know I'll come to my senses here soon. Don't you worry.
Well, our colleague Josh Birch couldn't be on the show tonight. He's been busy with car launches over on the Formula One side of things all day on his YouTube channel. But he did pass along this quote to me, and he's going to be on the show next week, hopefully. So maybe Justin Haley will win the race in that car, and then he'll really be fired up. But he did pass along this quote to me. He says, "I think it's unfair for Kyle to take the seat away from any upcoming talent when he's had such a long and successful career at the top of the pyramid in NASCAR. For him to come out for 3 races, which is really going to be 5, right, is like allowing for a former CEO to run the show for a day when there's been so many changes. He's had his time. He should allow the younger generation to shine." And I think that's kind of always been the argument against having Cup drivers in Xfinity and trucks. Brandon, I gotta say, you know me, I'm all about consistency. It doesn't really feel any different to me. Kyle is still who he is, a two-time Cup champion, with whatever it is now, 60 some odd Cup Series race wins, I believe. No doubt a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, somebody who is approaching all-time great top 10 level status in this sport. And to see him return to the Xfinity Series, I've got to say I'm not surprised either, especially with this trend I think he was kind of making light of in his announcement video of athletes unretiring these days. I know this wasn't retirement in that sense; it was just stepping away from doing these 5 Xfinity races a year. But I don't know. I mean, I try to stay consistent. I think a lot of fans, I think there has been a shift, because I remember growing up in the days where you could have 20 to 25 Cup drivers in a Busch Series race at a time. And that's not an exaggeration. I still remember the first Busch race I ever watched was 2007 Las Vegas. There were 26 Cup regulars in the field that day. So it's far, far better than it was 15, 16 years ago. But at the same time, it's the principle of the thing that still bothers me. And, we've had this discussion before. You don't see this in other forms of racing. The only other sport I can think of off the top of my head is baseball, when a guy is coming off an injury and trying to rehab a little bit. We saw it. If you want to talk about my Philadelphia Phillies, Bryce Harper did it coming off of his injury this year. And after 2 games and a couple of home runs, I think it was pretty evident that he was ready to come back. But I don't know. It just seems to me like there's been a shift here. And I don't know if it's just because we don't see it nearly as often these days, but I used to feel like it was very difficult to find fans that were okay with this. Now I feel like it's really, if it's not a 50-50 split, it might even be there are more fans on the side of we should be welcoming Cup drivers into the lower divisions. It gives the young guns an opportunity to measure themselves against the best that race on Sundays. And as much as I, am firmly on the side that I'm on, I do understand the arguments on both sides here. And I understand the opposition to it. I get that, the Xfinity drivers a lot of times say they love having the opportunity to race against Kyle Busch and see how they stack up. But again, it's not just a Kyle Busch issue for me. Chase Elliott's running a truck race at Daytona this weekend for Bill McAnally because, one of their drivers isn't 18 yet. I would, like Josh was saying, much rather see, put Derek Kraus back in the car. Derek helped build your entire truck program. I know he had a off season last year by the standards of first couple of years of that program, but why not put him back in the truck? And I understand that he's got a ride of his own this weekend, but it doesn't sound like he's got very much guaranteed beyond that this year. But there are plenty of other drivers in Chevrolet's pipeline, I'm sure, that would love the opportunity to race at Daytona. So why does it need? I understand the Cup driver brings sponsorship a lot of times from a business standpoint, but I just think in a perfect world, we'd see that opportunity go to another young development driver. And that's where the frustration lies for me. And of course, they're the best of the best that race on Sundays. So from a performance standpoint as well, the last time Kyle was in the Xfinity Series, he went 5 for 5 on wins. So you almost, with not 100% certainty, but you can watch the race and feel pretty good about knowing ahead of time who's, if not going to win the race, be in the top 3 or top 5, or at least in contention for it.
Yeah, I completely hear you, that argument. And I completely agree with you from everything you just said there. But at the same time, I think I've already got out of those stages of grief already from how long he's been dealing with the Xfinity Series and coming back now. And I think I'm more just glad that it's only going to be 5 races and it's not anything more.
Yeah, and listen, I will take this compromise. I think that it's probably this is where we're going to be set for a while. I don't see it going away entirely. I know my editor-in-chief over at LastCard.info, Brock Beard, wrote that op-ed that got, again, a lot of mixed reaction. People were fired up in the positive sense, and they were certainly fired up in the negative sense as well. Brock's saying it's time to put the hammer down and ban them outright. And again, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I know a lot of people would. And let me be clear, of course, I'm not, part of the marketing team or on the business side of, who writes the checks here for any of these race teams. So I get it. Sometimes it's inevitable. I guess we should be mad at Voyager for being part of the crypto boom that seems to, or crypto bubble, I guess I should say, that looked like it was booming and now is coming crashing down. I'm hardly a crypto expert, so I won't go too deep into that. But obviously it's, starting to affect drivers like Landon Castle. Of course, Brandon Brown had that whole deal with the LGB coin or whatever last off season. So, it's
the
difficult
dot-com bubble did the same thing too, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a very good point. I want to catch up on the chat here a little bit before we move on. Rod Brown, good to see him in chat. Rod, I think that's a new face here. Get Van Gisbergen into IndyCar. The guy is a huge talent. Well, I don't know. We need to forget the Euro kids, but I do agree with you on the first point there. I think Van Gisbergen would be a great fit for Project 91 as well. I know a lot of people are hoping to see that. But IndyCar as well. I think there are multiple opportunities for him here in America with the series that we have here for him to showcase his talent. So hopefully we get to see that one day. All right. Well, I knew this was inevitable. Kobe Lambeth in the chat. Good to see you, Kobe. Want to talk about your Eagles too? Not particularly.
Okay.
Sorry, Brandon. What was that?
I said you don't have to. It's okay. We all saw it.
Yeah. Well, I just posted. I went live on Instagram last night. The replay of the stream is on my YouTube channel, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. I will say this though: I'm doing a lot better than I would be doing if we didn't have a Super Bowl 5 years ago to fall back on. If we were 0-4 in Super Bowls, it would be. I probably wouldn't have taken it as well as I took it last night. But I will take 1-3. I know it's not great, but there are a lot of franchises that are still looking for their first. We had our first. It was recent enough. It's still a great memory for me and for this city. If you want me to be honest, I'm still most upset about the Union choking away MLS Cup because they still haven't won an MLS Cup. The Phillies have a World Series in my lifetime. The Eagles have a Super Bowl in my lifetime. That's still what I'm most frustrated about. But yeah, man, 0-4 in Philadelphia Sports Championships this year when you throw the USFL in there. It's been quite a year for us.
I just heard that last night was the very definition of what it means to be a Philadelphia sports fan. And for that, you have my condolences.
Yeah, well, they were flipping cars in the city before the game even kicked off. Like I knew they were going to do that, whether they
knew they were going to do
it. They were, yeah. Like the sun hadn't even gone down yet, and they were already. I don't know. And then they booed Dak Prescott when he was being awarded for. Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. I mean, it's not. I don't want to characterize the city based on a few bad apples, but
people need to chill out.
That frustrate me sometimes. So
I need to chill out.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is a racing show. I don't want to dwell on my Philly sports teams losing in the championships, all on Fox, by the way. That was the other common bond that all these heartbreaking moments share. They were all on Fox this year. So
it wouldn't be Encore if we didn't talk about your Philadelphia woes, Ben.
Yeah. Well, I see you've got the Atlanta Braves hat on there, so I guess you're just rubbing the rivalry in for me even more right now.
Hey, I'm ready for spring training is all that is.
I am too. Let's move on here. The ARCA Menards Series returns at Daytona this weekend, along with Xfinity and Trucks, of course, and one driver in the series in particular may draw a bit of interest from a new outside audience. Former Malcolm in the Middle star Frankie Muniz will run the full season for Rhett Jones Racing, replacing Amber Balkin, who moves to a part-time schedule with Venturini Motorsports. Now, Muniz has been a race fan for a long time. In fact, he was one of the last people to interact with Dale Earnhardt before his final race of the 2001 Daytona 500. His own racing career began at Long Beach in 2004 at the Toyota Pro Celebrity Race. And by 2007, he was competing in the Champ Car Atlantic Championship, where he remained until 2009. Some health issues sidelined Muniz for a while, but he returned to the driver's seat a couple of years ago to pursue a stock car career. Plans to run the West Series finale at Phoenix in November fell through, but Muniz now has a deal in place to run full-time on the National ARCA Tour in 2023. We're going to welcome in our friend Casey Campbell here. Casey, good to see you again. How's it going?
It's going well. Good to be back here on Grid Encore. And yes, I can't get in because you guys talked about spring training. I know you're a Phillies fan, you're a Braves fan, and of course, I'm a Mets fan. So we're gonna have a big year ourselves too. But yeah, it is good to be back on Grid Encore and good to be on the other shows too. So it should be fun. We got a fun weekend. Yeah. Muniz? Yes. He is here in the ARCA Menards series. When I first heard about this, and I think I heard about this before Christmas, to be honest with you, I was wondering if it was going to happen. A few other moves needed to happen before I could believe that this was going to happen. A few other moves did happen, and then I was basically telling everybody, yes, this is going to happen. So, yes, he is here. And for those who think he's going to just, be known as an actor, well, yeah, he is because of who he is and what he did. But the thing is, he wants to be known as a race car driver. He had a Zoom call with all of the media, And he basically said that I want to be known as a race car driver. I want to do this. This is something I've always wanted to do. And he's got a really competitive car behind him. Rhett Jones Racing went out and got some really good equipment. There's actually a lot of teams that have really good equipment behind them this year. Also, it's going to be interesting this year to watch and see how he does, because there's 20 races in the season. He's going to be in all of them. He's going to go to a lot of tracks that he's never been to. The only track he's been to was Mid-Ohio, and he hadn't been there in 14 years. And it's been 14 years since he's been there. So it's going to be quite interesting for sure. And I also want to say this. All 20 ARCA Menard Series races will be on either FS1 or FS2.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know how big that is.
Pretty big.
It's
no doubt.
huge.
Yeah.
I think I heard a quote from somebody, and I think FS1 and FS2 has 4 times more viewership than the previous one of the previous carriers of ARCA, of course.
Nav TV. Yeah.
Nav TV, yeah. What? So obviously, and I want to also give a big shout out to them. I got to interact with a lot of those talent over at Mav TV for a while. Of course, Mike Massaro was on this channel a couple times. Or actually might even schedule an interview in the next few weeks with him. So best of luck to those guys. I know they're going to be doing some good stuff. Some races will be on Flow Racing, but having all 20 races on the networks of FS1 and FS2 is going to be exciting. So that should be exciting there. We're going to go to Daytona. 41 cars are entered for this ARCA race at Daytona. How about that? That's exciting right there, guys.
Great to see the car counts back up.
Yeah, it is a good sign of things. That is the number that I kept hearing in the off season from some people in the know, and it should be a pretty good season. I know Phoenix is going to have a pretty good car count. Of course, that's combined with the ARCA Menard Series West, and also I know Talladega is going to get some good cars too. And we got a good. We'll talk about this when this season gets going. We got a pretty good ARCA East field lined up. I know we've got some competitive cars running for the championship, and I'm being told there is one more. We might see one more big entry that could be competing for wins. To answer your question, there, Joe, it's 40 cars. It's a 40 car field. So obviously, let's go through this. Cup is 40. Trucks are 36. Xfinity is 38. And ARCA is 40. Obviously, it's they start sending cars home at 40. So yeah, we'll see from there. ARCA does not really send a lot of cars home. It's a series. If you can pass inspection and you have the proper credentials to do it, yes, you can go in there. But yeah, once they get to 40, that's when they start sending cars home.
And we have another question from Kobe regarding what the Fords will be doing this year. Casey, do you have any answers on that?
Yeah, I do believe so. They're going to be running the Mustang. Haven't checked with Chevrolet yet if they're going to run the Camaro. Obviously, Toyota will still run the Camry.
Well, Brandon, I know you don't follow ARCA as closely as Casey and I do. You're more of an Xfinity and trucks guy, but you're obviously everybody's familiar with Frankie Muniz as an actor, but maybe not as much as a race car driver, despite how long he's been in this business as well. Do you have any realistic expectations for him as he heads into 2023?
Well, with being in the full season, that's obviously a really great thing for Frankie. And I want to just let you know how big of a treat you're in right now on Encore when you see Casey Campbell fired up about the full field and ARCA being on the full schedule for FS1 and FS2. That is amazing, and that probably will end up by effect letting me see plenty more of the races this year as they'll be more accessible. But Frankie Muniz, I remember going just hearing that he used to be a race car driver and just for fun, going back on Racing Reference and seeing all that stuff that he did with open wheel stuff. And it was, just a nice little footnote. It used to be, but now here he comes. He's got his health issues settled, and he's back ready to go in the ARCA Menard Series. Will he do well? Probably not the first year, but who knows? It's ARCA. You can do it if you set your mind to it.
Well, I don't know that anybody's expecting him to go out and win this race at Daytona or, be,
No.
front runner the first half of the year. I play, like Casey was saying, obviously a lot of these tracks he's never even seen before, let alone raced on. So,
Yeah.
It's going to be a learning curve and a learning experience for him. But from what I understand, gathering the interviews, this isn't just a PR publicity stunt. He's here to learn and to be competitive. And, I wouldn't rule out, if he performs well enough, because, he's not just going to be able to ride his name. Obviously, he's going to have to show that he can go out there and get the job done. But he has, ambitions to, I think, move up to trucks or maybe even Xfinity, a couple of years from now. So, he sounds very committed to this for the long term, which I think is great. Casey, I know you and I were talking on your podcast as well. How often do you get People Magazine and TMZ talking about the ARCA Menards series? So I think it's a great draw for, people that might not know a lot about this sport, let alone a series like ARCA, to hear a name like that. And, maybe the curiosity factor starts to kick in, and, who knows what happens from there. So I think it's going to be a great deal for everybody involved. And I know we're not really supposed to actively root for drivers here, in the roles that we're in here at Grid, but I would like to see Frankie have some success this year and prove a lot of doubters wrong, because I think a lot of people are seeing him, this actor's coming in, not having any experience in this series. He's, absolutely going to be terrible. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with how quickly he's going to pick this up, and, maybe he could surprise us and have a couple of good runs while he's at it.
Of course, the main goal is just to no DNFs. Try to finish the race, keep the car clean. And it's going to be, I know everyone's waiting for them to hear Malcolm in the middle 3 wide. That's been the joke that's been going around since he announced this.
Yeah, well, it's inevitable.
Yeah. Hey, also, we could see some surprise winners this season. There's a lot been going around, of course, a lot of new teams that are in the fold in the ARCA Menards series, just to kind of catch you all up. And this is the point of, us doing this preview kind of show. So Tony Constantino raced for the Fast Track team. He's starting his own team this season. Also, Veer Motorsports, in a partnership with Fast Track Racing, which is, of course, Andy Hillenberg's team. John Garrett's actually going to be running all 20 races this season. Greg Van Elst, of course, an owner of a fence company, will be, of course, running the full season again. Andy Jankowiak will run a majority of the races, from what I am told. We're also going to see a former baseball player in the ARCA Menards series, of course, a good friend of mine, Christian Rose, of course, who was on this channel, on my personal channel last weekend, to kind of talk about his kind of role. And of course, he'll be running for AM Racing this season. And of course, Jesse Love will be running for the full ARCA Menards series championship. And then also for Rev Racing, for Jesse Love running for Venturini Motorsports. And then for Rev Racing, Andres Perez de Lara will be running the 19 races this season in the 2 car, of course, vacated by the ARCA champion from last year, Nick Sanchez. Jack Wood is going to be running in the 2 this LeVar Scott's in the 2, and Jack Wood is in the 6. Of course, LeVar Scott's going to be running for the full ARCA Menards Series East Championship, and then Jack Wood's going to run a select number of ARCA races as well, of course, on his on the truck races he has for KBM. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. And of course, William Sawalich, that's the name that you're going to have to get very, very familiar with, because I think he's going to do a lot of winning, because of course he's going to be with Joe Gibbs Racing this season in running for the full East Championship, along with Sean Hingrani, who will be in the 25 for Venturini in the running for the full ARCA East. We'll obviously discuss more East once we get there, but I just wanted to maybe throw out some names in there to see. We might see a new team in the fold. Of course, the Pinnacle Racing team. Learned a lot about this team. The team has not announced a driver yet, but I'm being told we will know who it is after the Daytona 500.
Well, Sawalich for sure. I think, you look at the track record that 18 car has over the last couple of years with Ty Gibbs and Sammy Smith. I think he's certainly got the equipment. And from what I understand, I must confess, I wasn't too familiar with him before the announcement that he was going to be in that car this year, but it sounds like everybody's very high on his potential and his talent that he's got. So I'm expecting big things from him this year, no doubt. He's
from the state of Minnesota too. So obviously not a state that'll have a lot of drivers from. I know my good friend Mitchell Brewer and our newest Grid colleague Jonathan Fiel are pretty excited about it. And by the way, I should mention this: Grid Network will be at the Daytona 500. Jonathan's actually going to be at the first 4 races of the season, covering obviously for the racing experts as also our newest contributor here on Grid. So that'll be exciting too.
Yeah, plenty to look forward to, not just this weekend at Daytona, but all year, of course. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we did have a NASCAR race this weekend. Of course, we don't cover the modified series, or the modified tour rather, as much as ARCA on this channel, but since it's the only race this weekend, I figured I'd just go through it quickly here. Although ARCA East spent this February away from New Smyrna, the Wheeler Modified Tour was still competing there, and modified veteran and 2011 series champion Ron Silk picked up the 18th win of his career ahead of Justin Bonsignor and Matt Hirschman. And I got to say, a really thrilling battle between those three for the race win. Now, the modifieds will be off for a while. They'll return to action at Richmond on Friday, March 31st. Looking forward to another great year. And I know we'll talk about the Hall of Fame here in just a moment during our open segment later on in the show. But Justin Bonsignor in particular is somebody I've really been impressed with over the last few years. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this when you look at some of the names that are in the Hall of Fame already. I think if Bonsignor can add a couple more championships to his name with 30-plus wins that he's got in the Modified Tour, he could very well be a future Hall of Famer one day as well. So lots to look forward to in the Modified Tour, and I'm sure when they have companion weekends with the Cup Series, like they do a couple of times a year, we'll try to give them a shout-out on this show as well. Now, speaking of young prospects, and Casey, I know you're excited to get into this topic here. This week, Fox NASCAR insider Bob Pockrass offered up his annual list of the top 20 NASCAR prospects for the next decade. Now, the criteria for this list includes drivers 28 years old or younger who aren't racing in Cup and have no more than a handful of Cup Series starts to their name. 2022 Truck Series champion Zane Smith tops Bob's list this year, followed by Corey Heim, Chandler Smith, Taylor Gray, and Sammy Smith. So, Brandon and Casey, when you look at some of the names on Bob's list here, the top 20, but he ranked, and then the 25 more that he kind of added as a footnote there at the end. Who stands out to you the most as your top prospect, and who do you think is under the most pressure to deliver this season?
I mean, it's a pretty big list, Ben, so it does take a lot to digest. I know we've had some time to look at it today, but of course, Zane Smith up there at the top. I don't know if he's really got the most pressure per se. Well, I mean, it's probably a lot of pressure being up there at the top, but I was interested in the one at the very, very bottom of this list, and it's only because he doesn't have a confirmed solid ride for this year. It's Lane Riggs, and he's been tearing up South Boston, and of course he'd like to put some things together with Hallmark Friesen racing again. But at 20 years old, he seems like one of those underrated guys that's got a lot of talent that just needs that chance. And also, I mean, last year I've always said a lot about Chandler Smith. He's sitting at 3rd on Bob's ranking. He was 6th in the ranking last year, so he's moved up quite a bit. So I guess the most pressure has got to be on Zane Smith if I had to pick one that's got the pressure on him. Of course, I don't think I'm anywhere near the ability to make these sort of judgments on these young men as they're still very young and working their way through. And my other notables, as always, are guys like Carson Hocevar, Daniel Dye, and Raja Karuth.
Okay, so there's a lot of names to discuss here. And obviously, from covering ARCA and also trying to, obviously can be connected with different people, you kind of understand who some of the names to watch out for. And obviously, Brandon mentioned a few of them. I'll just go through a couple of them. Obviously, Zane Smith is someone that's been on my radar for a long time. I think Sam Mayer is going to be a little bit better this year. I know he's back with Marty Lindley this year. Of course, those two won 2 ARCA East championships. And obviously, if you've followed my channel for years, he is a frequent guest on my channel. I've known him for a very long time. I kind of see this year, and he kind of told me it's a big year for him. This is a year that he needs to go out and win, or who knows what could happen. So that's obviously someone to keep a big eye on. Nick Sanchez, obviously someone I've known, got to follow a lot throughout the ARCA Menard series the past few seasons. This kid's good. Got some big wins on the super speedways. and really performed well with the with the cars that he had, especially there. I mean, getting that win at Michigan last year was pretty cool to see. But obviously, looking at a name that you probably don't know, two names. I think one is on Brett Cruz is obviously a name that's caught a lot of people's attention. But it's definitely someone you need to keep an eye on. He's only 14 years old. He's ran the Chili Bowl a couple times. I think he's someone that I think you need to really pay attention to. And then couple other two names, Buddy Kofoid. Could we see him in the ARCA Menard series? I know he wants to go stock car racing. I know he's gotten some opportunities. You saw him with when KBM was a Toyota team in those couple of starts, and of course he was in the ARCA race at Springfield. And then the other name is Connor Zilich, is a name that you possibly may know. He's going to be doing a lot of Trans Am races this year, running the full TA2 schedule along with the Mazda MX-5 Cup schedule. By the way, you need to watch that. That's some of the most exciting racing that
yes, it is.
that you need to see. So, and obviously Connor was on my podcast not too long ago. So obviously check out their pickup, but you possibly could see him this year in an ARCA car. I'm not sure. They're still trying to work on the details, but that's obviously a couple of names to watch out for, and Luke Fenhouse as well.
Yeah, I must confess, Brent's name was the only name in the top 20 that I'm not super familiar with. I've definitely heard his name before.
Yeah,
but to look at his resume at only 14 years old, I can see why Bob has him ranked so high already at this point in his young career.
Brent's good. Obviously, I've had the chance to talk with him a couple times. Great kid. He's obviously someone that's been on my radar for a long time. Of course, he's also part of KHI management group as well. So that's obviously another name to watch out for. And looking at this list, I think another name you need to watch out for is Landon Lewis, another one. Obviously working with the Team Hornaday development program that I've gotten to know for a long time. Is obviously going to be someone there. I'm not sure what his plans are. I've kind of heard some things in the rumblings, but we'll have to see what he does this year. So obviously he won't be in the 16 for the McAnally team. Of course, he finished out the season there. Tanner Reif, who was in the 9 car last year, but for when the Sunrise team decided to close down at the end of 2022, of course he'll be in the 16 with BMR. We'll get more into that when we get to the West portion of the show.
I'm just going through the bottom of the list here. I'll be on the Women in Motorsports show on Friday morning to preview the ARCA race. Obviously, I think we got 5 women on the entry list there as well. Katie Hedinger made the list here at 17, Isabella Robusto at 19. I know that they've got development deals with Chevrolet and Toyota respectively. The female driver most prominently with Ford right now, obviously, is Haley Deegan. She fell out of the top 20. She's in the 25 others to watch. Of course, she's going into her 3rd full-time year in the Truck Series. She'll be with Thor Sport Racing this year. Brandon, I guess we can start with you on this one. When you look at Deegan's performance with DGR the last couple of years, is she the one that you think might be under the most pressure here to try to elevate her performance going into 2023?
Yeah, I think she's always had that sort of pressure on her, but yeah, especially this year. And I'm glad Casey brought up Sam Mayer. I didn't realize how important that would be for him to like a must-win kind of year for him after last year and his many battles with Ty Gibbs. But yeah, I agree with you there with Haley Deegan. This is a huge year for her to perform, and being on this list is a big honor, but it also comes at a big responsibility too. You want to prove to those around you that your steady climb has been worthwhile. And I think she's shown her prowess in a lot of different ways outside of a stock car as well. You look at her ability to perform at the Michelin Pilot Challenge at Daytona just a few weekends ago. That was an excellent job there with the Ford camp. But yeah, she's got to have a big year here ahead of her.
Casey, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that?
Yeah, I just I'm not really sure about Haley Deegan. I'm it's always like this is, and it's going to be interesting to see what she can do with ThorSport, and obviously them going back to Ford, and that's one of the biggest stories of the truck series so far, with all these manufacturer switches, and something I'm going to really kind of watch this season. It's not just with her and Ford, and that obviously it's going to be big to see what the Fords can do. I know that Matthew Bros said last year the trucks need more Fords. Ford heard you loud and clear, so they went out and they went right to work and got and there's a few Ford teams that are out there. I believe AM Racing is also Ford. By the way, Josh Rayum will be in the 22 truck this weekend for the team. And then Rayum Brothers Racing will be 2 trucks this year, and Mason Massey will be full time in the 33. Talked to Mason a few weeks ago, and the 34 team. This is an interesting stat pointed out by the stat man, Joe Shrigley from TobyChristie.com. For the first time ever, 2 drivers with the same exact name will be in the truck, will be in a NASCAR race, Jason White and Jason White. How to separate them is obviously Canadian Jason White, who will also be in the ARCA race on Saturday, will be in the 34. And, of course, Jason White, who you may remember that gunbroker.com truck. Of course, he'll be in the 1 truck for Tricon Garage.
Yeah, that's got to be very confusing, I think, for anybody looking at the spotters guidelines or the people working in the booth. I don't envy that job at all with 2 drivers who literally have the same first and last name. I think anytime you have like 2 relatives like Kurt and Kyle Busch, that would always get confusing enough here. So to have 2 Jason Whites in the field is going to be interesting. Although Casey, you might be able to answer this. I must admit I'm not too sure where they rank points wise for provisionals. I know we've got more entries than we do spots in the field. Is it looking like they might be safe on being able to fall back on points if they have to? Or
who exactly are you talking about?
In terms of qualifying for the truck race, well, is it looking like they'll be set if they don't set a fast enough time?
Ray, are you talking about Rayum?
Right. Yeah. For
yeah. So yes. So actually, I asked some people around if practice and qualifying were to be completely washed out, both Rayum trucks would make the field. So they are both good to go on points. So obviously it'll depend on if any of the trucks that would be in there. Now, if practice, it also is based on practice speeds as well. So actually how it works is it's dependent on the status of practice, since 2 speeds are determined by a practice in the event of a rainout. Now, if practice and qualifying were both rained out, which is entirely possible because it is the state of Florida after all, Clay Greenfield in the 84 truck, Brian Dowza in the 28 truck, Cody Roba, who will be in a second CR7 truck in the 97, Todd Peck, who will be in the 96 truck, Caden Honeycutt in the 04 truck for the Roper team. Good to see them back. And Jason White, of course, in the 1 truck for Tricon Garage, who missed the field. So yeah, they would be both good to go. Obviously, they'd have to get a fast speed on time. And by the way, hope everyone's doing okay over at Rayum Brothers Racing. I know they recently had a fire a few weeks ago from talking with Mason Massey, who's a good friend of mine. It looks like they're getting through it. There a lot of teams have come in and helped. As I've known, I've been in this industry for a long time. I know that when someone needs help in the racing community, everyone pitches in, and it's always good to see.
No doubt.
So
we'll be looking forward to that. But of course, we do still have qualifying to get through. So hopefully, we'll get that all sorted out there.
Also, one more, if I could, sorry to interrupt you, Ben, but I figured since we're talking about qualifying, might as well talk about Xfinity. If qualifying is rained out, now it's not based on practice speeds, unlike trucks. Timmy Hill, Alex LeBay, Kyle Sieg, Ryan Vargas, Jade Buford, and Cesar Beccarella would go home if qualifying was rained out.
All right. It's good to have you on top of all of that here. I'm sure I'll be messaging you as qualifying's happening, trying to figure out who's in here. But
I have some people that know way more about this stat stuff than I do. So it's good to see. It's good to have some cool friends that cover this sport.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been through a lot of the names that you're going to be seeing this weekend. When we look ahead to Daytona with ARCA trucks and Xfinity. I know it's still early. We haven't even gotten all the cars on track yet for practice or qualifying, but Casey, I'll start with you. Do you have early picks to win all three of those races here?
Okay, so I asked you guys this before the show, and so I do have early picks, but obviously they can change. They're not reflective on. For anyone that's in my personal preview show points championship, this does not affect that. Obviously, that could change in the minute. So for ARCA, let's see. Venturini Motorsports, they've been the top team at Daytona. They've won, I believe, the last 4 or 5 races, and the trend is going to continue today. The last 2 races have been won by the 20 car. That continues this year. Give me Jesse Love for ARCA. For trucks, it's who knows what could happen. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. 42 trucks, 6 go home. It's gonna be an all-out shootout. It always is at Daytona. And I'm gonna go with Raja Karuth. He's gonna get his first win in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series on this. And by the way, let's go Xfinity. Let's start off Chevrolet. Junior Motorsports was pretty good here a few years ago. They had a streak where they've won like a lot of times. They start a new streak this year, and that one car is going to go to victory lane in Daytona. Yes, Sam Mayer is going to go to victory lane. He and Marty Lindley start off 2023 with a W.
Okay, well, I think that the Venturini powerhouse is going to come to an end this year. And it's going to come from Volusia County's own Daniel Dye. And he's going to take the checkered flag there for ARCA at Daytona.
Wait. Daniel Dye's not in the ARCA race.
Uh-oh. Well,
he's in the truck race.
Well, I'll just skedaddle then. Well, I need to rethink my ARCA pick then because I really don't know diddly squat. So
are you going to stick with Dye from a truck series then?
Actually, no, I was going to do Raja Karuth, and my cat's on the table again. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, okay. Well, that happened last season, didn't it?
This is live on the internet, folks.
This is live.
Yes, it is.
She knows not to do that. I was going to go with Raja Karuth for the truck series, but I forgot that you maybe have already picked that too. So that's also kind of.
You guys can overlap. I don't
also kind of floundered.
Yeah.
But before the show, I did say Xfinity Series would be a Junior Motorsports car, but I'm going with Brandon Jones this year for. Is it still the beef? It's what's for dinner.
Yes.
300. Okay, mm-hmm. I love that title. But okay, before the show's over, I'll rethink my ARCA pick.
Okay.
Well, I'll go in reverse order here because I think I might surprise. Well, Casey, I told you what my ARCA pick is already here, but in Xfinity, I'm going to go with Josh Berry. Don't know why. I just think the Junior Motorsports teams always tend to show up in this race, and I think it might be his turn, if you will, to take the checkered flag first and start 2023 off with a lot of momentum. In the truck series, I'm going to go with Matt Crafton. Just an older veteran who might be able to stay out of trouble and be in the mix there at the end. Have a good feeling about him this year. And then Casey, what did I tell you at the start of the show? Raise hell orderly, praise Dale Quarterly. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I have this weird feeling that Quarterly might be able to find his way to the front, and the chaos that is the ARCA Menard Series might open a path for him to be in victory lane of the Daytona International Speedway. So we'll see what happens there.
And he's got a good car this weekend.
He does.
There's a lot of teams, a lot of the smaller teams, and this is one of the biggest surprises I think that you're going to see in the ARCA Menard Series. I was told by some people that know some things in that series, probably more than I do. We might see some surprise winners this year. Christian Rose could win. Greg Van Elst could win. And I'm not saying that, yes, of course they could win. But this is, I think, a legitimate chance that they actually could win. They've got some competitive cars this year. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, I love what Quarterly did at the ARCA test because he was in an old Daniel Dye car and was running the number 4. He just ripped the number 3 off. And then if you look at the name rail, D, A, L, and E are all in the name Daniel Dye. So he just peeled off the individual letters. So it said Dale above the driver door there. So I thought that was that. I mean, that was just that is an encapsulation of the ARCA Menard series in one picture there. Like, how can you not love this series here?
I love ARCA.
Yeah. Kobe, back in the chat room here. We'll talk a little bit about William Sawalich tomorrow night at 7 p.m. on the newest episode of Life on the Grid with Ben Walton from Dirty Mo Media. Yes, of course, the Minnesota connection there. If you want to hear a little bit more about that, make sure you tune in. Kobe and I talked with Ben earlier this past week, and it was a really good episode. Really pleased with how it went. So you guys definitely going to want to tune in for that tomorrow on this channel right here. And then Kobe's picks are Gus Dean for the Arkham Menard Series, Corey Heim in trucks, and Justin Haley for Xfinity. Like I said, if Justin Haley wins the Xfinity race, you're going to have a fired up Josh Birch on this show next week here. So we'll keep our eye out for that.
Yeah, I think if any Cup driver wins in Xfinity or trucks, you're going to get Josh fired up. Or get this, if anyone that races in in trucks or Xfinity win in ARCA, you'll have him fired up too. So.
Listen, I still don't see Justin Haley as a true Cup Series driver yet. I said it, but may change this year. But I wouldn't feel as bad if that's another story though. It's a whole can of worms. But I wouldn't feel as bad if Haley won an Xfinity Series race as opposed to Kyle Busch.
Yeah, well, there is that part of the argument as well. I don't know how much we got into it at the start of the show here, but
I didn't mean to drag you in. Didn't mean to drag you in, Casey.
Yeah.
Well, it's I know that a lot of people would like to see. I'm not opposed to having I think a lot of people this time are like, okay, maybe it's we have the new Kyle Busch, the new It's like I know a lot of people. He's not driving a Toyota anymore. He's driving a Chevrolet. A lot of people, there's a lot of hardcore manufacturers. It's like, they specifically root for Fords, or they root for Chevrolets, or they root for Toyotas. There's a lot of Chevy fans out there that I think are very happy to see Kyle Busch in one of their cars this year.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot to look forward to, of course, and I think it's inevitable. We'll see a bushwhacker, if you will, win a race at some point. So we'll be ready for Josh whenever that happens here.
Hey, let me ask you guys this. What are your thoughts on we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but we're probably going to be talking about this for a while. Your thoughts on the broadcast booths for this year for Fox?
I don't know. I mean, I like Adam Alexander. I think he's done a good job in the sport. I don't know that the booth is the best place for him. I think he works best in a studio role, similarly to how I thought Vince Welch was great in the pits, but not so great in the booth. I'll give Adam Alexander a shot here with the truck stuff that he's going to be doing.
He's not a bad announcer.
I'll let you know after 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. I just think, Fox has had Mike Joy for so long, and it's very hard to live up to that standard. But, honestly, Jamie Little's the same way. I think she's, I give her credit for trying, but I still think she's best in the pits and does a very, very good job there. But, again, I think it's part of, when you grow up with Mike Joy and you're used to, somebody of his level for, my goodness, what has it been now? This is the 23rd year for NASCAR on Fox. It's a very hard mark to equal there. But I do think he is far and away the best play-by-play voice that Fox has on their roster now. But, we'll wait and see. You always like to give people a couple of races to develop their chemistry in the booth with whoever they're working with. I know it's tougher on the Xfinity side of things because a lot of times they bring in an active Cup driver to be an analyst for just 1 or 2 races, and then they switch over to the next one. But we'll see how it goes this year.
Yeah. For Fox, they really need to start looking like who is going to fill those shoes whenever the time comes. If they're smart, they really will start looking for that next play-by-play voice that they want on the Cup Series level.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to, sound like, I don't want to get all sad here thinking about it, but I do think, it's inevitable at some point. Like Mike is absolutely closer to the end of his career than the start of it. So, sooner or later, Fox is going to have to make that call, and it's going to be very tough. But it is something that they need to start looking at, I think, whether it's with a new TV contract or, whenever it happens. But it's inevitable that it's going to happen at some point. He's going to step down and go enjoy retirement, and he deserves it because he's an absolute legend of the sport, and he's covered so many memorable moments. So I think Fox really needs to start taking a look at that. If they're serious about being a part of these contract discussions for 2025 and beyond, the time's going to come at some point.
I'll give you a good segue, Ben. I think he's a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I don't think that's a stretch at all. And that is a very nice segue because I want to talk about the Hall of Fame here a little bit. Obviously we don't have a lot of racing going on this weekend. So let's kind of have an open segment here and talk about something that I think is on the minds of a lot of people heading into Daytona this weekend. Jimmie Johnson is back. Of course, he's the co-owner now of the newly rebranded Legacy Motor Club. And the Hall of Fame is also still on the minds of a lot of people as they just recently inducted their class of 2023 into the Hall. Now, Matt Kenseth was among those inductees this year who, despite only having been out of a car for 2 years, found himself on the ballot this past spring. Kenseth spent the entire 2019 season out of a car, which did give him 3 full years of retirement before becoming eligible. Now, the same would be true for Jimmie Johnson this year in regards to being a part of a class of 2024. But Johnson, of course, is coming back on a part-time basis this year for the team he now co-owns, Legacy Motor Club. With 83 Cup wins and 7 championships, Johnson is, of course, a no-brainer for the Hall. But now that he's back on a partial schedule, Brandon, I'll pass this on to you first. Should NASCAR look at that and delay his eligibility?
Yeah, I guess what we're really looking at here is more of an issue of consistency on NASCAR's part. If you're going to do it for Matt Kenseth, make him wait for that length of time. Are you going to do it for Jimmie Johnson? But at the same time, I was thinking about this before we even got to this question. You've only got 3 7-time champions in the sport. One's Richard Petty, one's the late Dale Earnhardt Sr., and then you've got this guy. He's back in our sport. He's back in he's now in a leadership position, and he's going to be on a part-time schedule. I don't see the reason, unless you want to be consistent, which we're talking about NASCAR here. I think we should just go ahead and let him in. I don't see the reason of the formality for someone that's a 7-time champion of the sport.
I'm just going to say what Brandon said. This is something that, the Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame. I'm going to agree with you, Brandon. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, I will as well. And I think that this is, part of a uniqueness of NASCAR is, a lot of times you do see drivers come out of retirement for one-offs. I mean, heck, Bill Elliott ran an Xfinity race a few years ago after he had been inducted. I think he was class of 2015. I wouldn't bet my life on that, but I think that's right. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, he comes back in 2018, and I know NASCAR Chasm was making jokes about the rookie stripes on the back of his car because it was technically a track he'd never raced at before. But, I mean, that's again, part of the uniqueness of this sport here. And I think, Dale Jr., for example, he's been running one Xfinity race a year ever since he retired. They didn't, look at that and say, oh, you're still a NASCAR driver. We're going to make you wait another year and push your eligibility back. Jimmy's not coming back on a full-time basis here. So I think when you look at somebody with his resume, I guess we'll know for sure in a couple of months whenever the names are released for the ballot, but I don't see any reason to delay it either. I think that, obviously I think this might have been another NASCAR Chasm tweet, actually. I forget who exactly said this. It might have been him, but he said he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a don't even need a ballot Hall of Famer. Like, everybody obviously acknowledges that this isn't, a guy who won 20 Cup races and came close to a championship, but maybe his Xfinity stats give him a little bit of a boost. Like, this is a no-doubter, first ballot all the way. Whenever Jimmy's, first on the ballot, he's going to get in right straight away, and he deserves to be recognized like that. It's inevitable at some point. I don't see the reason to push it back a year just because he's coming back to do a few races.
And this might be a call to add an amendment to the Hall rules. Maybe change it to must wait after being after your full-time status. That might be a great addition to the Hall's eligibility rules and all that. And also, on another note, for drivers that are going to be in the Hall of Fame, we're not guaranteed another day on this earth. I mean, wouldn't you want a guy that's going to be in the Hall, especially a guy like Jimmie Johnson, to enjoy that jacket for as many years as he has left?
Yeah.
I mean, just let the guy wear the jacket.
This kind of goes back to what you said, Ben, on my podcast about when we were talking about the Hall of Fame. Kind of remind everybody kind of what you said there.
Yeah, well, again, I don't want to sound morbid when I say this, but Herschel McGriff is 95 years old. I mean, that man deserved to give his own speech and have that moment and celebrate that moment for himself. And I'm so glad he got to do that. Now, Herschel is in phenomenal health. I don't think he was joking when he said Bill McAnally and Richard Childress have offered him a ride when he turns 100. If anybody's going to live into their early hundreds, I would not put that past Herschel at all. He's in phenomenal shape for his age. But, like you said, Brandon, none of us is guaranteed another day on this earth. And, I think there's no reason to push that moment back, even for a guy like Jimmy Johnson. It's like we said, it's not even a discussion for him. Now it becomes an issue, obviously. And I've touched on this, like you said, Casey, on your podcast as well, for the Pioneers. I find it very frustrating that we're down to 3 nominees a year, and we lost a year with the pandemic. There was no class of whatever it was, 21, I guess, was the year that we lost. So I don't see why we couldn't, make it up for that year and put 6 people in one year. I mean, we were putting 5 in a year forever. The original sin, if you will, I guess it sounds kind of bad when I put it that way, but, the 25 nominees that were originally on the ballot when the Hall of Fame broke ground are all in now anyway. Red Byron, I think, was the last one to get in 2018. So again, those were all guys that, you can argue who should go in ahead of who, but nobody was questioning whether or not they're Hall of Famers at all. So why not put all of them in straight away so that we have a solid foundation for the Hall of Fame? And then as some of the legends of the current day start retiring, their days will come and they might not have to wait as long. And the Pioneers, that might be a little bit more borderline. We can let the committee decide and vote on them for themselves, but they won't have to wait as long either. And we can fill up the Hall of Fame with names that deserve to be there, because as far as I'm concerned, we still have plenty of Pioneers that still need to go in. And when you're down to 3 a year and only one of those spots is reserved for the Pioneers, I don't know. Something just doesn't sit well with me there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to consider here with this topic. I know it's not a perfect system, but
no,
I think, because again, Kenseth only ran part-time in 2018 when he was with Roush, and Jeff Gordon came back when Dale Jr. was going through the whole concussion issue. So it's always kind of been a gray area. I think, Brandon, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. There needs to be a harder, outline in terms of what we consider eligible or not. And then, the discussion we have right now wouldn't even be a discussion, because it would be right there in the bylaws and we'd all abide by it. So I think that's something that we need to look at. Well, like I said, it's kind of been the topic of the show. We're just trying to fill some time with preview and obviously hitting on a couple of other topics here. I know there's not much to talk about in terms of one shining moment, but we don't talk a lot about Supercross on this show. And there was something that stood out to me in Supercross this weekend I just want to touch on real quick. And that is, again, a name that is going to be familiar to race fans here. Hayden Deegan is making a name for himself in the 250 class in Supercross. Of course, the younger brother of Haley, the son of a motorsports legend, Brian Deegan. Hayden got his first heat win in the 250 class this weekend in the Monster Energy Supercross Series. So I want to give him a shout out. And he's a name to keep your eye on as well. Of course, he's going to have a phenomenal career and emulating what his father accomplished in that side of this great sport, I'm sure. And he's off to a great start this year in his rookie year in the 250 class. So just want to highlight him in the One Shining Moment segment for this weekend. And this is going to be a lot easier to come up with One Shining Moments, because we've got a lot to look forward to as the show or as the season continues on, rather, here. And Casey, I see you just put in our private chat that you actually do have a One Shining Moment. So go ahead. Feel free to share it.
Okay. This, Ben Schneider, I know one thing that you've always preached on in this show and throughout your commentary is consistency. We have something that's going to happen this weekend that I think you're really going to like, and someone that I think goes very, very underappreciated in motorsports. Matt Crafton will be celebrating his 20th year of racing with Menards as a sponsor. It is according to Thor Sport Racing, they sent a release out, I believe, early last week. This is Menards and Matt Crafton are the longest tenured partnership currently right now in NASCAR, surpassing Richard Petty and STP. And don't get me wrong, this is coming from the Thor Sport Racing PR department. But they're going to commemorate 20 years of running the Menard scheme with Crafton this weekend. I believe it's I'm not sure how many starts he has. This is the consecutive. How many consecutive starts he has?
It's in the 500s now, I think. I mean, it's remarkable. When you think of how much turnover there is in that series. And, just even things like, the pandemic or injuries, like Crafton never, got sick and had to take a week off, or got injured and had to miss a month of racing over, whatever it is now, 22, 23 years that he's been racing in the truck series, of course, mostly with Thor Sport. I think he had that one year in 2000, whatever it was, 2004, 2005. I remember it from my old 2005 Chase for the Cup game. I think it was in a six truck for KHI. But most of it has been in that 88 for Thor Sport Racing and with Menards on the hood. I mean, it's just a remarkable streak that he's got going. And like I said, I mean, I'm picking him to win Daytona. I mean, he's still a threat week in and week out. He's with a great team. And, Casey, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a remarkable streak and a remarkable tenure that they've been able to enjoy. That's brought 3 championships and, plenty of race wins in the truck series along with it.
Just to see the mountain of consistency with that team. And I've talked to Matt Crafton several times throughout my time. He's always down to do interviews. He's not afraid to say what needs to be said. And he's just a great ambassador just for the truck series. And I asked him one time, why are you saying the truck series so much? He kind of compared it to, and I always remember this, a lot of people like, college football over the NFL. And that's kind of that analogy. I mean, there's some people that enjoy the Xfinity racing and truck racing, maybe better than the Cup Series. It's just maybe it's just the preference. It's just and don't get me wrong. I mean, I enjoy all levels of racing, but I know there's a lot of people that enjoy the feeder series, more than the top level, because the thing is, it's like I think it's more relaxed. It's less pressure and all that. Obviously, it's pressure, but maybe not as much as the top level in the Cup Series.
Right.
So yeah. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm glad you did. And again, you want to go back to the Hall of Fame discussion that we were just having. 3 championships in the truck series, and what I think it's 15 wins, which some people were saying maybe isn't quite enough, but you've got those 3 championships to go with it. I think, of course, guys like Jack Sprague, Mike Skinner, I think should be considered first. But I mean, how can you not consider a guy with 3 championships in NASCAR, one of NASCAR's top 3 divisions, for a Hall of Fame one day? So I think if Crafton can add a couple more wins to his resume, maybe even another championship, certainly wouldn't put it past him. I think he's got a resume that at least warrants consideration. It's not like Jimmy Johnson, where obviously he's going in, but he could be in the conversation. I think he is in the conversation when you talk about representing other series. I always say this as well. It's not the Cup Hall of Fame; it's the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So I think Crafton is certainly a candidate there. Well, that's going to do it for us here on the season premiere of Grid Live Encore. So be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network and follow us on all of our social media platforms, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, and most importantly, right here on YouTube. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the Indianapolis 500 later this year. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show to consider joining our Patreon, invest in the Grid Network, and help keep us on the air throughout 2023. Thank you, as always, to Colin, Deshelle, Mark, and Robin, and of course, our newest Patreon supporter, David. Your support means the world to us. It allows us to continue to expand our coverage here at Grid Network. And as you see on the screen, if we can hit a number like $500 a month, we're going to continue to be able to send our on-air talent to the racetrack a little bit more often and cover even more races for you guys. So if you, like I said, if you really liked what you saw tonight, please consider doing that. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can choose the Buy Me a Coffee option. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent. Any amount, like I mentioned, will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. And as always, thank you to Edward, Amber, and Zachary, who have chosen that option as well. Now, it's a busy weekend, or a busy week, I should say, a whole week of programming here at Grid Network. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, tomorrow you can catch a brand new episode of Life on the Grid featuring Dirty Mo Media's Ben Walton. Kobe and I had that conversation earlier this week. Kobe will be back on Wednesday as well, hosting Grid Tonight with Josh Birch. On Thursday, we'll have a special edition of Grid Live pre-race before the duels at Daytona. I'll be joining Joe Samniego and Daniel Zeri on the Women in Motorsports program on Friday morning. And then, of course, you can stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage throughout Daytona 500 weekend with a special pre-race edition for the 500. And, of course, wrap up and encore to follow as well. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we sign off from our season premiere?
Yes. Casey, is Cotter Jones at Daytona?
No, Connor Jones is not old enough to race at Daytona. Connor Jones.
Dang it.
So Connor Jones just signed a deal with Thor Sport Racing. He'll be racing for 9 races this season with the team, and I believe it is the youngest driver in Thor Sport Racing history at just age 16. So he'll be at the races. He'll be allowed. Obviously, Connor's been on my channel before. It'll be an interesting thing to see what he does. He's a good talent and a big prospect for Thor Sport as well as for Ford.
Okay, so I can have somebody in the race. Is there somebody in Venturini that's not Gus Dean or Jesse Love that's going to be there?
Amber Balkan.
There you go. There's my pick.
Okay.
So Balkan, Carruth, and Brandon Jones. There you go. It's set.
All right.
And Tony Brodinger will be there in the 4th entry.
Tony Brodinger will be in the 55. She'll run a part-time schedule in that car. Also, Our Motorsports is back. David Starr is going to be in the 02 this weekend at Daytona. Good to see them back. There was a lot of conversation that that team wasn't going to be around, but they are back. And also, congratulations to Colin Fern. He's going to start an Xfinity team that will debut at Richmond. I think he's like the 2nd youngest team owner in the series. So, yeah. And by the way, Daniel Dye will be in the 43 truck for GMS Racing. GMS will have 3 trucks this season. Of course, Enfinger in the 23, Roger Carruth in the 24, and Daniel Dye in the 43.
Great to see a lot of new teams and new faces popping up all throughout ARCA Trucks and Xfinity. We'll be keeping our eye on it all season right here on Grid Encore. For Brandon Crossland and Casey Campbell, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you all throughout the week as we get ready for the Daytona 500.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.